Hello, everybody. So today we're working on lesson 5.6, which is called Solving Percent Problems. This is the second part of chapter 5 still. And our learning target today is going to say, I can, hold that thought, I can solve percent problems. So let's go ahead and get that written in. So the last lesson, we talked about what a percent looks like as a fraction, and then what it would look like back as a percent with a percent sign. This one is focusing on now, okay, here's a percent. Now let's use it to find parts and wholes. So we should be on page 226 in our green math books, where we're going to jot down a few pieces of info before we get to some examples. At the top, we'll see our key idea. It says finding the percent of a number. We're actually going to write that down because there's two different kinds of things we're going to do today. One of them is finding the percent of a number. And it's important that we take a close look at the steps when we're trying to find the percent of a number, because they are different than the ones we're going to do in the second half of the lesson. In words up there, it says, write the percent as a fraction, then multiply by the whole. The percent times the whole equals the parts. So we're going to go percent times whole equals part. So these are the steps we're going to take. Take the percentage and write it as a fraction. Multiply by the whole number, possibly written as a fraction as well. And that's going to give us the part when we're finding the percent of a number. So, for example, if we have 20% of 60 is 12, well, here's our percentage. The of is going to be a multiplication sign. The whole is 60. The is represents our equal sign, and the 12 is our part. So 12 out of 60 on a test or on assignment would get us a grade of 20%, which is not so good, but that's what that means. So let's look at example 1. Change colors here. Example 1 says finding the percent of a number. So it says 25% of 40 is what number? We're going to write out the phrase exactly how they say it. 25% of 40 is what number? So let's take this and follow these rules. Percent times the whole equals the part. So if we have our percentage, remember 25 as a fraction would look like this, 25 over 100. Remember the of represents a multiplication sign up here. 40 is going to be our whole, so we're going to multiply by 40. If we want to turn 40 into a fraction, remember it would be 40 over 1. The is represents our equal sign, and our part is what we're looking for. So that is going to be our final answer that we get. Now at this step, we have to think back to how we multiply fractions. So remember, when we have a fraction multiplied by a fraction, you can multiply tops and then bottoms to get your answer. However, please, please, please be sure that you simplify at this step before you start multiplying. So up here, I'm going to switch back to blue because this is an important thing you want to remember back from our fraction work. I'll put a little asterisk over here. Remember to simplify and cancel first. Okay, so that's the step that we're talking about. So now going back to our example number 1, If we take a look and see if we can simplify anything in our set of fractions, we have a 40 and a 100. Well, yes, we can simplify the 40 and 100. So we think about something that can go into both of them. So let's see. 20 can go into 40, and 20 can go into 100. We could also divide by 4 here and 4 here. So we'll have to figure out what that would equal here. So we also can convert 25 and 100 as well. So let's do some canceling. Let's see. Let's see 20 can go into 40 2 times. 20 can go into 100 5 times. Okay, well 2 and 5 can't be simplified anymore. But look at this. 25 and 5 can be simplified. 5 can go into 5 1 time, and 5 can go into 25 5 times. So now we have a 5, a 1, and a 2, which end up all being prime, so we can't do any more simplifying. So now we're going to go top number times top. So 5 times 2 would be 10. Bottom number times bottom. 1 times 1 is 1. So our final answer is 10. Let's make sure that makes sense. 25% of 40 is what number? So if I got a 25% as a grade on a test, that would mean I got 10 correct out of 40 questions. And that actually does make sense because 10 is not very many compared to 40, and this would be not such a hot grade. Let's move on to example 2. Now in example 2, it wants us to create a ratio table in order to solve this, but we're just going to do the same thing we did up here in example 1 to continue practicing solving these. So the question this time says 60% of 150 is what number? So we're going to write that out exactly how we see it. 60% of 150 is what number? So let's go ahead and do what we did up here. We're going to make these fractions and multiply those fractions. So 60% would be 60 over 100. The of would represent a multiplication sign. And the 150 as a fraction would be 150 over 1. We would be figuring out what that equals. So this is where we start simplifying. So if we take a look at our numbers here, I see a 150 and 100. Well, I know that 50 can go into 150, and 50 can also go into 100. So let's use 50 to simplify. 50 can go into 100 2 times, and 50 can go into 150 3 times. So 2 and 3 there. Now if we look up and down here, 2 and 60 can both be divided by 2. 2 can go into 2 once. 2 can go into 60 30 times. So now we have our simplified. We can't simplify the 30 with the 3 because they're both sitting on the top. So now we're going to go top times the top. So 30 times 3 would be 90. Bottom times the bottom. So 1 times 1 is 1. So our final answer is going to be 90. Now let's make sure again that this makes sense. 60% of 150 is what number? So if I got a 60% on my test, I'm saying that I got 90 correct out of 150. And 60% is a little over half, so 90 out of 150, that is a little over half. So yes, our answer makes sense. I would pause the video and look at page 226 at the bottom and try out those 4 on your own. Okay, if you tried them out, here are your answers. Number 1 is going to be 18. Number 2 is going to be 24. Number 3 is going to be 11. And number 4 is 22 and a half. Now we're glancing at page 227, and at the top, there's a new key idea that we're going to be looking at. So I'm going to go back to blue because that's the color we use when we're trying to do some vocabulary or important notes. And this one is called Finding the Whole. So I'm going to title this part, Finding the Whole. So this is a new set of directions because we're going to not be finding the part this time. We're finding the whole number this time. So up in the key idea, it says write the percent as a fraction, then divide the part by the fraction. The part divided by the percent equals the whole. So we're going to write that down. The part divided by the percent equals the whole. So we're going to follow these same steps every time to find the whole. So now we can kick into example 3. So example 3 says 75% of what number is 48? So let's write down exactly how it says that. So this time, instead of finding the part or how many you got correct on a test, we're finding the whole, meaning how many questions we had to do on the test total. So that's what the difference is. So what we'll do here is we'll take our 75% and we'll make it a fraction still. But this first part says we need the part to come first. Then we divide by the percent. So the first part is the part. Now 48 would be our part here. So we're going to put 48 as a fraction, so over 1 in the front. Then I see the division symbol, so I'm going to put that down next. Then I see the words the percent. Here's my percent, and remember 75% would be 75 over 100. And then that's going to give me the whole. So solving this question is going to help me find the whole. Now remember from our fraction work that when we see division, we use that silly old tune, same, change, flip the fraction. So we're going to keep the 48 over 1 the same. We're going to change the sign to multiplication, and we will flip this fraction upside down. And at this point, we'll stop and see if we can do any simplifying. So from here, yes, we can do some simplifying. I know that 75 and 100, well, 25s can go into those. So 25 can go into 75 3 times, and 25 can go into 100 4 times. So that gets those down quite a bit. So then if you look at the 48 and the 3, those can actually also be canceled. 3 can go into 3 once, and 3 can go into 48 16 times. So there is our final canceling numbers. So once again, we'll multiply top times the top. 16 times 4 is going to give us 64. Then we'll multiply bottom times the bottom. 1 times 1 is going to give us 1. So our final answer for the whole is going to be 64. And let's back up just a second and figure out if that makes sense. 25% of what number is 48? So if we got a 75% on our test and we got 48 questions correct, we need to know how many total were on the test. And it says there's 64 down here in our answer. So if we got 48 out of 64, we would get 75% on our test. So yes, that makes sense. Okay, new page here. Whoa, come on. There we go. Okay, moving on to example 4, where it says finding the whole using a ratio table. We are going to do the same thing we did before. We're not going to use a ratio table. We're just going to practice the same concept one more time that we just learned, just to make sure it's making a lot of sense to us. So let's go ahead and jot down example 4. And this one says 120% of what number is 72? So we're going to write it out exactly how we see it. 120% of what number is 72? So going back to these notes we wrote up here, the part comes first, then we divide, then we put our percent. So if we go back down, our part this time is 72. So making that a fraction, we have 72 over 1. Then we divide, and then we put our percent. This time we have 120%, so we have 120 over 100. That's going to give us our whole. So we're going to same, change, flip the fraction. So we have 72 over 1 stays the same. Our division sign changes to a multiplication sign, and we flip this fraction. So now it's going to say 100 over 120. From here, we start to simplify. So 100 and 120 can both be divided by 20. 20 can go into 100 5 times. 20 can go into 120 6 times. Now we'll figure out how many times can 6 and 72 be simplified by. Well, 6 can go into both of these items. 6 can go into 6 once, and 6 can go into 72 12 times. And we have officially been simplified. So now we do top times the top. So 12 times 5 would give me 60. We have 1 times 1 on the bottom, which would give me 1. So our final answer here is 60. So we will find and make sure this makes sense here. 120% means that we have gotten more than how many were correct. So, or how many were actually offered on the test. So if there were 60 points total and we got 72 correct, then yes, we would have over 100%. So yes, our number makes sense. I would pause the video and try on your own 5 and 6 at this point. Okay, so number 5 is 200 and number 6 is 50. We've got actually 2 examples left, so this video is a little bit longer than our other ones, but here we go. We've got example number 5 here. This is a real-life application question. It says the width of a rectangular room is 80% of its length. What is the area of the room? So let's draw a little room over here. Here's our room. And in the picture in the book at the top of page 228 is where I'm looking. It says the width is 15 feet. So from here over to here is 15 feet. Then it tells us that the length is 80% of the width. So this distance from up here to up here, or one of the 2 distances, is 80% of width. So it's 80% of 15. So let's pause here and try and figure out what 80% of 15 is. So 80% of 15. So right here, we're actually trying to find a part because 15 is the whole. We want a part of that. So if we go up to our notes up here, we're actually not going to use these notes, finding the whole. We're going to use the notes we did at the very beginning, finding the part. So we have percent multiplied by the whole equals the part. So let's go back. We have the percent, which would be 80 over 100, times the whole, which is 15 over 1, is going to give us our part. Let's go ahead and simplify here. 115 can both be divided, and those can be divided by 5. 5 can go into 15 3 times. 5 can go into 100 20 times. Then we can simplify the 80 and the 20. 20 can go into 20 once, and 20 can go into 80 4 times. So now we'll go top times the top, which would give us 12. Bottom times the bottom, which would give us 1. So that means our other distance over here is a 12. So if I want to find the area of this room, I would do length times width. And in this case, we would have 15 and 12. So we're going to go 15 times 12. If we do that work, we end up with 180 feet. And remember, we put a squared on our area. And we have completed exercise number 5. Last one for today is example 6, and this is another real-life application. On page 228, halfway down, it says, you win an online auction for concert tickets. Your winning bid is 60% of your maximum bid. How much more were you willing to pay for the tickets than you actually paid? There are 4 choices here. So if we take a look on the left, you've got some tickets there, and it says the winning bid is $120. So your bid is 60% of the maximum bid. So we have a couple of steps that we have to try and solve here to get this answered. Switch colors real quick, and we'll go for it. Let's jot down some important information they give us first. We're talking about concert tickets. And the winning bid in the picture, they tell us, is $120. Then they tell us that your bid, 60% more. So that's important information. So the first thing we probably want to do is take 120 and divide it by 60%, because we want to figure out how much that original one was. So if we do 120, that would be 120 over 1, if we made that a fraction. We'll divide it by 60%. So remember, a percent is over 100, so 60 over 100. Remember, when we have division, we do same, change, flip the fraction. So we'll keep the 120 over 1, change the sign, and flip that second fraction. So it's 100 over 60. Now let's do some simplifying. 60 can go into 60 once, and 60 can go into 120 twice. That was a quick simplifying. There's really nothing else we can do here. So 2 times 100 would be 200. 1 times 1 would be 1. So that means that $200 is what we were willing to pay. So the question that says, how much more were you willing to pay for the tickets than you actually paid? We were willing to pay $200. We actually paid $120. So if we take $200 and we take away the $120, we will get how much more we were actually willing to pay. So if we do that subtraction, we end up with $80 more. So that's going to be our final answer. And if you look at the choices in the book, that would be item B. There's only one more on your own at the very bottom. Go ahead and pause if you'd like to try it. If you tried that one, the answer was $5. And that brings us to the end of solving percent problems.